Legions. First, we will look at the legionaries, which was the most important factor in expansion of Rome. Legion word comes from legio, which means levy. A Roman proverb says, "If the legionary is strong, Rome is strong." Legionaries were created by conscription. Conscriptions were annually made by two councils of Rome in spring and terminated in 19th of October by the festival of October Horse. Conscription age was between 16 and 46, but there were some exceptions like the general Titus Flavius Virilis, who served until his 70s. Only men could be in the Roman army, no women were allowed to join. Legionaries were first created in the 5th century before Christ, and there were 4 legions at the beginning, which were 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th legion. Yes, it was not 4, but 4. The 1st legion was the most prestigious one. Usually a legion lost his reputation, but gained it back in some events. For example, the Fulminata legion, which was the 12th legion, lost the eagle that they carried during the Jewish revolt in the 1st century, but the same legion protected Marcus Aurelius when the Germanic tribes surrounded him. In 104 before Christ, consuls Rutilius and Gaius Maius reformed an upgraded army. Thus, the elite regiments were created. One of the reforms was about carrying the equipments to the battle area. By that time, equipments were carried by vans. Marius decided every warrior can carry their equipments with them. Of course, warriors didn't like it, but it seriously increased the mobility of army. Because of this reform, those warriors, which lived at the same time with Consul Marius, were called Marius Mules. Another important reform was about fugitives. The penalty of not joining the army was execution. Let's talk about some numbers. At the beginning, one legion included 4,200 men. In war times, this number increased, and in the Punic Wars against Rome's main enemy, Carthage, in 218 before Christ, it reached 5,200 infantry and 300 cavalry. In the Empire times, it increased to 6,000 men. Every decy of a legion was called cohorts. That means one cohort included 600 men approximately. Because of Emperor Augustus' victories and the Roman expansion, 1st and 2nd centuries Anno Domini were the golden era for Roman legionaries. Unit types and commanders. Unit types were classed based on the age of warriors. The youngest ones were called velites. One step olders were called hastati. One more step olders were called principes. The oldest and the most experienced ones were called triari. In emergency times, a retired Empire legion could be called to duty again. Those unit types were called evocati. Centurions were the commanders of every 100 men. Then this number became 80 men, which is called centuria. Centurions could promote and able to command a cohort. Centurions of the most prestigious legions, most prestigious cohorts, first legions, first cohort, were called primi ordines, and the most highly placed centurio in a legion was called primus pilus. Centurions were wearing distinctive equipments. They had silver armors and knee pads. They were also carrying their swords on the left side as a distinct from other warriors. Their helmet's crest was vertical to the front. Optio was the person who delivered centurion's commands to the other men. If a centurio dies, Optio would replace him. Rewards. According to their success on battle, warriors were rewarded with silver mark, plate, or some crowns and necklaces. In an assault to the enemy camp, the first one to pass over the camp's walls was rewarded with Crown of Valor. A warrior who showed bravery and success in a naval warfare was rewarded with the Naval Crown. This crown was decorated with ship's bows. A warrior who managed to pass over the enemy walls in an assault to a city was rewarded with Moral Crown. A warrior who saved a wounded one's life was rewarded with Civic Crown, which is one of the most prestigious crowns. In 81 before Christ, when Julius Caesar was a young man, in the siege of Mytilene, which is the Greek island and capital of Lesbos, he was rewarded with that crown. Rules in the camp. Legionaries were not allowed to marry, therefore no women were allowed in the camps. Roman military education was hardly disciplined and strict to rules. Legionaries were educated not only how to use a sword and shield, but also how they could be more prepared physically and mentally to battle. Stealing valuable things from camp, giving wrong or false evidence or information, homosexuality, trying to gain respect and reputation by changing commanders' commands, and sleeping on duty were the reason of death penalty. Digimatio. If a legion or cohort commit a war crime like escaping from battlefield, every deci of unit was executed. Rest of the unit was forced to sleep outside of the Roman encampment. This punishment was forgotten over time since the early Republic, but the ancient punishment was resurrected by Marcus Crassus during the Spartacus gladiator rebellion in 72 before Christ, when 2 of his legions disobeyed his direct orders not to engage the enemy. As a result, they suffered a terrible defeat. Crassus' response to this obedience was brutal. He assembled the 2 legions and pulled out every 10th man as he walked across the ranks. Each man who was pulled out was to be beaten to death by his preceding 9 comrades. Some scholars say that Julius Caesar joined these 2 legions to form his legendary Legio ex Equitata. Clothing, nutrition, currency, and payment. Historians have 2 opinions about Roman clothes color. It was either red or white, although Vitruvius, a Roman architect, wrote that it was easier and cheaper to obtain red and yellow. Legionaries rarely used blue, but on the sea they used it to honor Neptune, the god of fresh water and sea. Roman currency was called sesterces. When a new emperor acceded to the throne, he donated 300 sesterces to every man. One Roman legionary was gaining 450 sesterces per annum. When Caesar acceded to the throne, he paid 300 sesterces for 3 times per annum. Basically, he doubled the price. If a legionary fought bravely, he will be rewarded with a salary increase of 50 sesterces or a doubling of his salary. The ones who were awarded 50 sesterces of salary increase were given the title of sesquiplicatus, while those who doubled their salary were given the title of dupliciatus. Legionaries' main nutrition resources were oil, bread, and wine. Every centuria was cooking their own meals, and sometimes they were eating meat. Coffee, tomato, banana, and sugar were not discovered by Romans yet at the time. The only sweetener that they used was honey. They were eating their meats by using their hands and using their daggers to slice bread and meat. Armors, helmets, shields, and swords. Torso armor, Lorica segmentata. It was used for 2.5 centuries but never became the main armor type because of its inflexibility and high weight. It was about 14 kilograms and made of iron. Lorica hamata. It was the main armor of legionaries because of its flexibility and lightness. It was made of iron or bronze and probably learned from Celts in ancient times. Helmets. In early ages, Romans were using Montefortino helmet up to the 1st century before Christ. This was replaced directly by the Culus helmet, which raised the neck peak to eye level and set a sturdy frontal peak to the brow of the helmet. In early centuries, heavily armored units, hastates, were adding eagle feather to their helmets to show themselves much bigger to the enemy. In Julius Caesar's times, it replaced by the horsehair crests. It was yellow at the beginning. Then it became purple and black. Legionaries were wearing neckwears to prevent helmets friction. Shoes. Legionaries were wearing caligulae. Swords. Short swords were known as the gladius and used by legionaries. It was 50 centimeters long and made by Spanish steel. Legionaries also used the spada and the Pugio swords. Hastae. Hasta is a Latin word meaning a thrusting spear. Hastae gave their name to those Roman soldiers known as hastati. During Republican times, only the triaries used hastae. Javelin. Shortest one was 152 centimeters and the longest one was 213 centimeters long. Those spears were thrown to the enemy by the velites. In battles, there was 1 meter space between each soldier, thus they could throw their javelins to the enemy first and then attack. Shields. The scatum. This shield has 75 centimeters width and 121 centimeters length. It is shaped convex and strengthened with iron at the corners. It was always carried at the left and had an emblem on it which legion it belonged to. In imperial times, it was shaped oval. I would rather be first in a little Iberian village than second in Rome.